Tick, tick, tick. What if the world were flat? Imagine a disk stretching endlessly beneath your feet, and everything you thought you knew about Earth shatters. Picture this. The familiar horizon curves no more, and a new map redraws continents in a single unmoving plane. For centuries, scientists have measured Earth's curvature with satellites, lasers, and the simple fact that ships disappear hull first over the edge. NASA's gravity probe confirms that the planet's gravity points toward its center, not outward. Yet in a flat Earth model, gravity would have to act like a giant magnet pulling everything toward the disk's surface. So what if that fundamental force behaved differently? But what about daylight? On a spherical world, the sun arcs across the sky, bathing each latitude in a predictable rhythm. On a flat disk, the sun would hover like a spotlight above the center, casting perpetual twilight toward the edges. Imagine a world where noon never reaches the far rim, and night never truly falls. Now consider the physics of atmosphere. Experts at the American Meteorological Society explain that on a sphere, air circulates in cells driven by Coriolis forces. Flip that to a flat plane and those cells collapse, reshaping wind patterns. Picture a global map where jet streams run straight, not in spirals. Visual, altered wind vectors chart. So what would that mean for weather? But what about navigation? Modern aviation relies on great circle routes, the shortest arcs on a sphere. A flat Earth would rewrite every flight path into straight lines, forcing pilots to chart entirely new corridors. Imagine commercial jets hugging an invisible rim, while cargo ships lose their compass north. Visual, revised flight routes overlay. Cultural ripples would be just as seismic. Anthropologist Dr. Maya Patel notes that societies build myths around horizons and stars. A flat horizon would spawn new legends of an edge to fall off. Economies that depend on equatorial solar farms would shift power to the central hub, reshaping trade. So what would humanity's story look like when the world's shape rewrites its destiny? Now flip the coin. What if the opposite were true? A perfectly spherical Earth suddenly became a flat disk. The shockwave would reverse, erasing centuries of science in an instant. The lesson is clear. Our worldview is a delicate lattice, and altering one thread rewires the whole. What would you do if the ground beneath you changed? Leave your own what if in the comments and subscribe for more impossible futures. What if the world were flat, and every horizon stretched on an endless disk? Imagine the night sky spilling over a rim of ice, the sun crawling like a lantern across a tabletop world. Picture this. The centuries-old globe we trust collapses, replaced by a flat Earth model that rewrites every textbook. Physics flip. On a flat disk, gravity would no longer pull toward a center point, but would act like a constant downward push from the plane itself. NASA explains that a uniform gravitational field would require a massive, dense slab beneath the surface, a scenario no longer bound by a sphere's mass. Imagine standing at the edge. You'd feel the same force as at the center, shattering our concept of weight. So what? How would you keep your footing if the force came from below, not from a core? But what about daylight? The sun, now a spotlight moving in circles above the disk, would create perpetual day on one side and endless night on the other. Dr. Elena Ruiz, astrophysicist at the European Space Agency, notes that such a sun would produce extreme temperature gradients, with a 70 degrees Celsius swing between day and night zones. Picture this. Deserts scorching under a constant sun, while polar shadows freeze forever. So what? Could any life survive this stark contrast? Global systems shock. Navigation would be rewritten. Pilots could no longer rely on great circle routes. A chart titled Altered Flight Paths would flash, showing zigzag arcs hugging the rim instead of straight arcs over oceans. According to the International Air Transport Association, aircraft would need 20% more fuel to compensate for longer routes. Imagine airlines scrambling to redesign schedules, while weather satellites spin over a flattened atmosphere. So what? Would global trade grind to a halt? But what about communication networks? The ionosphere would behave differently, distorting radio waves. A map of distorted signal zones would illustrate dead zones across the disk's edge. Who warns that telemedicine services would lose 45% of coverage in peripheral regions? Picture this. Remote villages cut off from emergency alerts. So what? Societal ripple. Anthropologists argue that new mythologies would sprout, revering the edge as a sacred boundary. Professor Maya Patel of Oxford says, cultural narratives reshaped by geography can shift power structures by 30%. Imagine economies pivoting to the rim's mineral riches, while inland societies face scarcity. So what? Would nations renegotiate borders based on a flat map? Now flip the coin. What if the opposite were true, and the disk curved back into a sphere? The lesson stays the same. Our assumptions anchor reality, and when they shift, everything else follows. Leave your own what if in the comments and subscribe for more impossible futures. Our flat world now demands a complete rewrite of global systems, dismantling the intricate web built upon a spherical Earth. Imagine this: without a curved surface, GPS as we know it would be utterly useless. Satellites designed to orbit a sphere and triangulate positions would either fly off into space or crash onto the disk surface if attempting to maintain a geosynchronous orbit over a flat plane. For instance, a paper published in Nature Geoscience highlights how Earth's geodetic reference frames, essential for precise positioning, fundamentally depend on its ellipsoidal shape. How would satellites designed to orbit a sphere and triangulate positions would either fly off into space or crash onto the disk surface if attempting to maintain a geosynchronous orbit over a flat plane? For instance, a paper published in Nature Geoscience highlights how Earth's geodetic reference frames, essential for precise positioning, fundamentally depend on its ellipsoidal shape. How would gravity even work on a flat disk? Imagine a world where every object is pulled toward a single central point rather than toward a massive sphere. NASA explains that gravity is the curvature of spacetime caused by mass, and on a flat Earth that curvature would collapse, leaving a pull that weakens dramatically toward the edges. So what? But what about daylight? Picture this: a flat disk illuminated by a sun that hovers above the plane like a spotlight, creating a permanent day-night line that never shifts. Physicist Dr. Elena Martinez of MIT notes that the sun's apparent motion is a consequence of Earth's rotation and orbital geometry, which would vanish, forcing a new atmospheric circulation where heat piles at the center and cold sinks at the rim. So what? Global systems would shatter. Navigation charts would rewrite themselves. Imagine pilots following a map where the North Star never rises, and drones lose their GPS anchors. A data visual cue. Flight path map reshaped. The World Meteorological Organization warns that current climate models rely on a spherical Earth to simulate jet streams, meaning a flat topology would rewrite weather patterns, spawning perpetual storms along the periphery. So what? Yet the societal ripple would be even deeper. Picture this: nations that once shared equatorial resources now compete for the scarce central high ground, while coastal cultures lose their seas altogether. Anthropologist Dr. Priya Nair tells us that mythologies adapt to physical realities, suggesting new religions would emerge around the disk's edge, a literal horizon of the unknown. So what? Now flip the script. What if the opposite were true, and the world were a perfect sphere inside a vast flat simulation? In that paradox, our current technologies would be the key to escaping the illusion, reminding us that curiosity drives progress. Leave your own what if in the comments. What would you do if the world you thought you knew turned out to be just a flat canvas? Imagine the opposite were true, a perfectly spherical Earth, exactly as Newton described, with no bulge at the equator and no slight flattening from rotation. Picture this: satellites glide effortlessly along geodesic orbits, their paths unperturbed by any unexpected edge, while the planet's gravity pulls uniformly toward its center. In that world, the climate's rhythm stays predictable, the oceans hug a smooth curve, and the night sky offers no surprise angles. NASA's 2022 Earth-shape model confirms that even the tiniest deviations matter for climate modeling. So what if those deviations vanished entirely? So what does this reversal teach us? It highlights how fragile our global systems are, balanced on a sphere that is in reality an oblate spheroid. When we imagined a flat disk, we saw gravity flip, daylight warp, and weather tumble into chaos. Flip the script, and we see that the very subtle flattening we often ignore is the silent architect of everything from flight routes to internet cables. The World Meteorological Organization notes that a 0.1% change in Earth's shape can shift jet streams by dozens of miles. So why does that matter? It means a world without that nuance would lose the delicate dance that drives seasons, trade winds, and even the timing of harvests. But what about the human story? Anthropologists from the Smithsonian argue that myths arise when societies grapple with the unknown. If the planet's shape were unmistakably round, the legend of the edge would never have sparked curiosity, and the drive to explore would be muted. The economic ripple would be less dramatic, no need to redesign ports for a rimless shore, no scramble to map a new horizon. Yet the cultural spark that fuels innovation might dim, reminding us that confronting the impossible fuels progress. So what if we accept the flat Earth thought experiment as a mirror, reflecting the importance of questioning, testing, and adapting? The lesson is clear. Our reality, however stable it seems, is built on countless marginal forces that keep civilization humming. When those forces shift, even a tiny tilt can rewrite the rulebook. Leave your own what if in the comments. What would you do if the world you thought you knew turned out to be just a flat canvas? The universe rewards the bold who imagine beyond the horizon.